In the skies of the early 20th century, few names soared higher than Amelia Earhart. At a time when society expected women to stay grounded, she set her sights on the sky. Her dream was to become the first female pilot to fly all the way around the planet. Little did she know, this dream would lead to one of the greatest unsolved mysteries of the 20th century. Join us as we cover the life of Amelia Earhart, her groundbreaking achievements, her fearless pursuits, and the moments that brought her closer to a tragic destiny written in the clouds. Amelia Mary Earhart was born on July 24th, 1897, in Atchison, Kansas. Even as a child, she was different from most girls her age. She enjoyed climbing trees, catching insects, and making sleds out of leftover wood. People often describe her as a tomboy. Her father, Edwin, was a railroad claims officer. Her mother, Amy, came from a wealthy family but chose not to raise her daughter with traditional gender roles. In 1907, the Earhart family moved to Des Moines, Iowa, because of Edwin's job. The next year, Amelia, who was 10 at the time, saw an airplane for the first time at the Iowa State Fair. Her dad offered her a ride, but she wasn't impressed. She even described the plane as a thing of rusty wire and wood. In the years that followed, Amelia's father began having problems with alcohol, which forced her to grow up quickly. She went to several different high schools and later joined Ogant School in Pennsylvania. But in 1917, while visiting her sister Muriel in Toronto, Amelia saw injured soldiers coming back from World War I. This experience moved her deeply, and she decided to leave school so she could volunteer as a nurse at the Spadina Military Hospital. In 1920, Amelia took her first airplane ride at an airfield in Long Beach, California. The ride cost her $10, but what she gained was priceless. As soon as we left the ground, I knew I had to fly, she said. But one big challenge stood in her way: money. She needed to pay for flying lessons. So she took on different jobs like working as a stenographer, a photographer, and even a truck driver, anything to earn enough. Amelia started flying lessons with Anita Snook, one of the few female pilots at the time. She kept working and training, and after a few months, she bought her own plane, a bright yellow second-hand Kinner Airster biplane, which she lovingly called the Canary. In 1922, she set her first record in that very plane, reaching an altitude of 14,000 feet, the highest any woman had flown at the time. The following year, in 1923, she became the 16th woman in the U.S. to earn a pilot's license from the Fédération Aéronautique Internationale. In 1928, Amelia got an unexpected phone call from George Putnam, a wealthy publisher. A woman had dropped out of a planned transatlantic flight, and Putnam was looking for someone to take her place as a passenger. Amelia accepted the offer and became the first woman to cross the Atlantic by air. The press nicknamed her Lady Lindy, comparing her to the famous pilot Charles Lindbergh. But Amelia knew she hadn't actually flown the plane. "I was just baggage," she admitted. Still, the journey changed her life in other ways. She and Putnam grew close. He helped manage her career, arranged speaking events, and published her books. They eventually fell in love and got married in 1931, but only under Amelia's conditions. Before marrying George, she gave him a letter explaining that she wouldn't make any promises to obey and hoped he would allow her to keep her independence. With his support, she wrote books, gave speeches, endorsed products, and became a powerful voice for women's rights. As the aviation editor for Cosmopolitan and a consultant in aeronautical engineering at Purdue University, she inspired a generation of young women to aim for the skies. On May 20th, 1932, exactly 1 year after her wedding, Amelia Earhart took off alone from Newfoundland in a red Lockheed Vega. For 14 long hours, she battled freezing temperatures, mechanical problems, and exhaustion. Finally, she landed in a cow pasture in Northern Ireland. She made history by becoming the first woman to fly alone across the Atlantic. In 1935, she reached another milestone when she became the first person to fly solo from Honolulu to California and then from Los Angeles to Mexico City. She had fame and recognition, but she wasn't done. She had her sights set on something even bigger, a flight around the world. She called it the last great flight. It would be her toughest journey yet, covering 29,000 miles with most of it over open ocean. Purdue University set up the Amelia Earhart Fund for Aeronautical Research and gave her $50,000, which would be about $1.13 million in today's money. The funds were used to buy a Lockheed Electra 10E, a plane specially fitted for long-distance flights with extra fuel tanks to help her go farther without stopping. For navigation, she picked Fred Noonan, a skilled pilot with experience flying across the Pacific. They trained for months and felt fully prepared. But so was the tragedy that waited ahead. On March 17, 1937, Amelia Earhart began the first part of her journey to fly around the world. She took off from Oakland, California, heading for Honolulu, Hawaii, in her Lockheed Electra. The original plan was to fly east to west, following the equator. But soon after takeoff, the plane ran into trouble when the propeller hubs had mechanical issues. This forced an emergency stop at Luke Field, a military base in Hawaii. The damage was serious, but it could be repaired. While mechanics worked on the plane, Amelia took the time to rethink the mission, considering the weather and other factors. She decided to change direction and fly from west to east instead. On June 1, 1937, she and Fred Noonan took off again, this time from Miami. Over the next several weeks, they flew across South America, Africa, India, and Southeast Asia. By June 29th, they had reached New Guinea. At that point, they had covered nearly 22,000 miles. Only 7,000 miles remained, mostly over the wide, open Pacific Ocean. The next stop was Howland Island, a tiny piece of land in the middle of the Pacific. It was only about 1.5 miles long and just over a mile wide. On a map, it barely showed up, but finding it was going to be one of the most challenging parts of the trip. Fred Noonan had created a detailed radio plan to help them locate the island. At first, everything seemed to be going smoothly, but then the weather changed. Dark clouds filled the sky and visibility dropped. They had to adjust their altitude and keep moving forward. At first, they sounded calm and in control, but as hours passed, the pressure grew. The weather got worse, and the flight became harder. They weren't just flying to a location anymore. They were trying to survive the vast Pacific. At 6:14 a.m. on July 2nd, Earhart made contact. She said they were 200 miles from Howland Island and asked the USS Itasca, a nearby ship, for a radio signal to help guide them in. But her message wasn't coming through clearly. The ship could hear her, but she couldn't hear them well. More time passed, and Earhart's fuel was running low. She tried again at 6:45 a.m. This time, her voice sounded more urgent. She said they were 100 miles away, but her messages were full of static and hard to understand. The Itasca crew did everything they could to help, but it wasn't enough. The plane was now just 1,000 feet above the ocean. The vast Pacific stretched out in every direction, with no land in sight. At 7:30 a.m., the final message came through. It was faint and hard to hear. "We are on the line 157-337 degrees. Amelia's voice faded with each word, and then silence. About an hour after Amelia's last radio message, the Coast Guard ship Itasca began looking for her near Howland Island. The U.S. Navy joined the search soon after. For 17 days, they used every ship and plane they could to try and find her. It became the most expensive search in U.S. history at the time, costing $4 million, which would be about $87 million today. But they found nothing. When the Navy ended their search, Amelia's husband, George Putnam, kept looking. He paid for his own search and sent 2 small boats to nearby islands. But still, no sign of Amelia, Fred Noonan, or the plane. It was as if the plane had vanished into thin air. On January 5, 1939, Amelia was officially declared dead. The U.S. government believed her plane ran out of fuel and crashed into the ocean. But the absence of concrete evidence only fueled more questions. What really happened? Where had she gone? Over the years, many theories have tried to explain what happened to Amelia Earhart. One of the most well-known is the Nikumaroro theory. This theory suggests that Amelia and Fred Noonan may have landed on Gardner Island, which is now known as Nikumaroro. This theory gained traction in the late 20th century when bones were found on the island, which some thought belonged to Earhart. But later studies showed the bones likely didn't match her. Without solid proof, the theory lost support, just like so many others. In 2003 and 2006, an explorer named David Jordan led deep-sea searches near Howland Island. He used advanced sonar to skim more than 1,200 square miles of ocean floor. But like others before him, he didn't find anything. Then, in 2024, a company called Deep Sea Vision thought they might have cracked the case. Their unmanned underwater vehicle detected a shape on the ocean floor, 16,000 feet deep and about 100 miles from Howland Island. At first glance, the sonar images looked promising. Some believed it could be the wreckage of the Electra, but after further analysis, the object turned out to be a rock formation. Even after all these years, no one has found any confirmed piece of Amelia Earhart's plane. The mystery still remains. Amelia once said, "The most effective way to do it is to do it." And she lived by those words all the way to the end. If you enjoyed this story and want to see more like it, make sure to subscribe to our channel. And don't forget to leave a like to show your support. That's all for today, and we will see you in the next video.